Back to Sleep with Sherlock, where we will be reading the classic detective novels of Sherlock Holmes as quietly as possible. I want to make sure that everyone is safe, so if you're wearing headphones, please try wireless ones. Find yourself a nice comfy spot and prepare for our trip to Victorian London. I have loved these stories since I was a kid, and I am so excited to go on this journey with you. Today will be part 2 of The Adventure of the Noble Bachelor by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Let's begin. The young lady came to London then, and you renewed your acquaintance? Yes, her father brought her over for this last London season. I met her several times, became engaged to her, and have now married her. She brought, I understand, a considerable dowry, a fair dowry, no more than is usual in my family. And this, of course, remains to you since the marriage is fait accompli. I really have no inquiries on the subject. Very naturally not. Did you see Miss Doran on the day before the wedding? Yes. Was she in good spirits? Never better. She kept talking of what we should do in our future lives. Indeed, that is very interesting. And on the morning of the wedding, she was as bright as possible, at least until the ceremony. And did you observe any change in her then? Well, to tell the truth, I saw then the first signs that I had ever seen that her temper was just a little sharp. The incident, however, was too trivial to relate and can have no possible bearing upon the case. Pray, let us have it, for all that. Oh, it is childish. She dropped her bouquet as we went towards the vestry. She was passing the front pew at the time, and it fell over into the pew. There was a moment's delay, but the gentleman in the pew handed it up to her again, and it did not appear the worse for the fall. Yet when I spoke to her of the matter, she answered me abruptly, and in the carriage on our way home, she seemed absurdly agitated over this trifling cause. Indeed, you say that there was a gentleman in the pew? Some of the general public were present then? Oh, yes. It is impossible to exclude them when the church is open. This gentleman was not one of your wife's friends? No, no. I call him a gentleman by courtesy, but he was quite common-looking person. I hardly noticed his appearance. But really, I think that we were wandering right far from the point. Lady St. Simon then returned from the wedding in a less cheerful frame of mind than she had gone into it. What did she do on re-entering her father's house? I saw her in conversation with her maid. And who is her maid? Alice is her name. She is an American and came from California with her. A confidential servant? A little too much so. It seemed to me that her mistress allowed her to take great liberties. Still, of course, in America, they look upon these things in a different way. How long did she speak to this Alice? Oh, for a few minutes. I had something else to think of. You did not overhear what they said? Lady St. Simon said something about jumping a claim. She was accustomed to use of slang of the kind. I have no idea what she meant. American slang is very expressive sometimes. And what did your wife do when she finished speaking to her maid? She walked into the breakfast room. On your arm? No, alone. She was very independent in little matters like that. Then after we sat down for 10 minutes or so, she rose hurriedly, muttered some words of apology, and left the room. She never came back. But this maid, Alice, as I understand, deposes that she went to her room, covered her bride's dress with a long ulster, put on a bonnet, and went out. Quite so, and she was afterwards seen walking into Hyde Park in company with Flora Miller, a woman who is now in custody and who had already made a disturbance at Mr. Doran's house that morning. Ah, yes. I should like a few particulars as to this young lady and your relations to her. Lord St. Simon shrugged his shoulders and raised his eyebrows. We had been friendly footing for some years, I may say on a very friendly footing. She used to be at the Allegro. I have not treated her ungenerously, and she had no just cause of complaint against me. But you know what women are, Mr. Holmes. Flora was a dear little thing, but exceedingly hot-headed, and devotedly attacked me. She wrote me dreadful letters when she heard that I was about to be married, and to tell the truth, the reason why I had the marriage celebrated so quietly was that I feared lest there might be a scandal in the church. She came to Mr. Doran's door just after I returned, and she endeavored to push her way in, uttering very abusive expressions towards my wife, and even threatening her. But I had foreseen the possibility of something of the sort, and I had two police fellows there in private clothes who soon pushed her out again. She was quiet when she saw this, and there was no good in making a row. Did your wife hear all this? No, thank goodness she did not. And she was seen walking with this very woman afterwards. Yes, that is what Mr. Lestrade of Scotland Yard looks upon so seriously. It is though that Flora decoyed my wife out and laid some terrible trap for her. Well, it is a possible supposition. You think so too? I did not say probable, but you do not yourself look upon this as likely? I do not think Flora would hurt a fly. Still, jealousy is a strange transformer of character. Pray, what is your own theory as to what took place? Well, really? I came to seek a theory, not to propound one. I have given you all the facts. Since you ask me, however, I may say that it has occurred to me as possible that the excitement of this affair, the consciousness that she made so immense a social stride, had the effect of causing some little nervous disturbances in my wife. In short, that she had become suddenly deranged. Well, really, when I consider that she has turned her back, I will say, when I consider that she has turned her back, I will not say upon me, but upon so much that many have aspired without success. I can hardly explain it in any other fashion. Well, certainly, this is also a conceivable hypothesis, said Holmes, smiling. And now, Lord St. Simon, I think that I have nearly all my data. May I ask whether you were seated at the breakfast table so that you could see out of the window? We could see the other side of the road and the park. Quite so. Then I do not think I need to detain you longer. I shall communicate with you. Should you be fortunate enough to solve this problem, said our client, rising. I have solved it. What was that? I say that I have solved it. Well, then where is my wife? That is a detail which I shall speedily supply. Lord St. Simon shook his head. I'm afraid that it will take wiser heads than yours or mine, he remarked, and bowing in a stately, old-fashioned manner, he departed. It is very good of Lord St. Simon to honor my head by putting it on a level with his own, said Sherlock Holmes, laughing. I think that I shall have a whiskey and soda and a cigar after all this questioning. I have formed my conclusions as well as to the case before our client came into the room. My dear Holmes, I have notes of several similar cases, though none, as I remarked before, which were quite as prompt. My whole examination served to turn my conjecture into certainty. Circumstantial evidence is occasionally very convincing, as when you find a trout in the milk, to quote the rose example. But I have heard all that you have heard. without, however, the knowledge of pre-existing cases which serves me so well. There was a parallel instance in Aberdeen some years back, and something on very much the same lines at Munich the year after the Franco-Prussian War. It is one of those cases, but hello, here is Lestrade. Good afternoon, Lestrade. You will find an extra tumbler upon the sideboard, and there are cigars in the box. The official detective was attired in a pea jacket and a cravat, which gave him a decidedly nautical appearance, and he carried a black canvas bag in his hands. With a short greeting, he seated himself and lit the cigar, which had been offered to him. "What's up then?" asked Holmes with a twinkle in his eye. "You look dissatisfied." "And I feel dissatisfied. It is this infernal St. Simon marriage case. I can make neither heads nor tails of this business. Really, you surprise me. Who ever heard of such a mixed affair? Every clue seems to slip through my fingers. I have been at work upon it all day." "And very wet it seems to have made you," said Holmes, laying his hand upon the arm of the pea jacket. "Yes, I have been dragging the Serpentine." "In heaven's name, what for?" "In search of the body of Lady St. Simon." Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his chair and laughed heartily. "Have you dragged the basins of the Trafalgar Square fountain?" "Why, what do you mean?" "Because you have just as good a chance of finding the lady in one as the other." Lestrade shot an angry glance at my companion. "I suppose you know all about it," he snarled. "Well, I have only just heard the facts, but my mind is made up." "Oh, indeed. Then you think that the Serpentine plays no part in the matter?" "I think it is very likely." "Then perhaps you will kindly explain how it is that we found this in it." He opened his bag as he spoke and tumbled onto the floor a wedding dress of watered silk, a pair of white satin shoes, and a bride's wreath and veil, all discolored and soaked in water. "There," he said, putting a new wedding ring upon the top of the pile. "There is a little nut for you to crack, Master Holmes." "Oh, indeed," said my friend, blowing blue rings into the air. "You dragged them from the Serpentine?" "No, they were found floating near the Mary by park keeper. They have been identified as her clothes, and it seems to me that if the clothes were there, the body would not be far off. By the same brilliant reasoning, every man's body is to be found in the neighborhood of his wardrobe. And I pray, what did you hope to arrive at through this?" "Had some evidence implicating Flora Miller in the disappearance." "I'm afraid that you will find it difficult." "Are you indeed now?" cried Lestrade with some bitterness. "I'm afraid, Holmes, that you are not very practical with your deductions and your inferences. You have made 2 blunders in as many minutes. This dress does implicate Miss Flora Miller." "And how?" "In the dress is a pocket. In the pocket is a card case. In the card case is a note. And here is the very note." He slapped it down on the table in front of him. "Listen to this. You will see me when all is ready. Come at once. F.H.M." Now, my theory all along has been that Lady St. Simon was decoyed by Flora Miller, and that she, with confederates, no doubt, was responsible for her disappearance. Here, signed with her initials, is the very note which was no doubt quietly slipped into her hand at the door, and which lured her within that very reach. "Very good, Lestrade," said Holmes, laughing. "You really are fine indeed. Let me see it." He took the paper in a listless way, but his attention instantly became riveted, and he gave a little cry of satisfaction. "This is indeed important," he says. "Ha, you find it so?" "Extremely so. I congratulate you warmly." Lestrade rose in his triumph and bent his head to look. "Why," he shrieked, "you're looking at the wrong side. On the contrary, this is the right side. The right side? You're mad. Here's the note written in pencil over here. And over here is what appears to be the fragment of a hotel bill which interests me deeply. There's nothing in it. I looked at it before, said Lestrade. October 4th, rooms 8S, breakfast 2S, 6D, cocktail 1S, lunch 2S, 6D, glass sherry 8D. I see nothing in it. Very likely not. It is most important all the same. As to the note, it is important also, or at least the initials are, so I congratulate you again. I've wasted time enough, said Lestrade, rising. I've wasted time enough, said Lestrade, rising. I believe in hard work and not sitting by the fire spinning fine theories. Good day, Mr. Holmes, and we shall see which gets to the bottom of the matter first. He gathered up the garments, thrust them into the bag, and made for the door. Just one hint to you, Lestrade, drawled Holmes before his rival vanished. I will tell you the true solution of the matter. Lady St. Simon is a myth. There is not, and there never has been, any such person. Lestrade looked sadly at my companion. Then he turned to me, tapped his forehead 3 times, shook his head solemnly, and hurried away. He had hardly shut the door behind him when Holmes rose to put on his overcoat. There is something in what that fellow says about outdoor work, he remarked. So I think, Watson, that I must leave you to your papers for a little. It was after 5 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes left me, but I had no time to be lonely, for within an hour there arrived a confectioner's man with a very large flat box. This he unpacked with the help of the youth whom he had brought with him, and presently, to my very great astonishment, a quite Epicurean little cold supper began to be laid about upon our humble lodging-house mahogany. There were a couple of braced and cold woodcock, a pheasant, a pâté de foie gras pie, with a group of ancient and cobwebby bottles. Having laid out all these luxuries, my 2 visitors vanished away like the genii of the Arabian Nights, with no explanation save that the things had been paid for and were ordered to this address. Just before 9 o'clock, Sherlock Holmes stepped briskly into the room. His features were gravely set, but there was a light in his eyes which made me think that he had not been disappointed in his conclusions. They have laid out the supper, then? He said, rubbing his hands. You seem to expect company. They have laid for 5. Yes, I fancy we may have some company dropping in, said he. I am surprised that Lord St. Simon has not already arrived. Ha! I fancy that I hear his step now upon the stairs. It was indeed our visitor of the afternoon who came bustling in, dangling his glasses more vigorously than ever and with a very perturbed expression upon his aristocratic features. My messenger reached you then, said Holmes. Yes, and I confess that the contents startled me beyond measure. Have you good authority for what you say? The best possible. Lord St. Simon sank into the chair and passed his hand over his forehead. What will the Duke say, he murmured, when he hears that one of the family has been subjected to such humiliation? It is the purest accident. I cannot allow that there is any humiliation. Ah, you look on these things from another standpoint. I fail to see that anyone is to blame. I can hardly see how the lady could have acted otherwise, though her abrupt method of doing it was undoubtedly to be regretted. Having no mother, she had no one to advise her of such a crisis. It was such a slight, sir, a public slight, said Lord St. Simon, tapping his fingers upon the table. You must make allowance for this poor girl placed in so unprecedented a position. I will make no allowance. I am very angry indeed. and I have been shamefully used. I think that I heard a ring, said Holmes. Yes, there are steps on the landing. If I cannot persuade you to take a lenient view of the matter, Lord St. Simon, I have brought an advocate here who may be more successful. He opened the door and ushered in a lady and a gentleman. Lord St. Simon, said he, allow me to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Francis Hay Moulton. The lady, I think, you have already met. At the sight of these newcomers, our client had sprung from his seat and stood very erect with his eyes cast down and his hands thrust into the breast of his frock coat, a picture of offended dignity. The lady had taken a quick step forward and had held out her hand to him, but he still refused to raise his eyes. It was as well for his resolution, perhaps, for her pleading face was one which it was hard to resist. You're angry, Robert, said he. Well, I guess you have every right to be. Pray make no apology to me, said Lord St. Simon bitterly. Oh yes, I know that I have treated you real bad and that I should have spoken to you before I went, but I was kind of rattled, and from the time when I saw Frank here again, I just didn't know what I was doing or saying. I only wonder I didn't fall down and do a faint right there before the altar. And right there, we're going to take a break. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Sherlock, and I hope you enjoyed this reading of The Adventure of the Noble Bachelor by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Please join me next time for another chapter of this timeless classic, as well as check out some of We Killin It's other content at WeKillinIt.com. And until next time, sweet dreams.